Hello and welcome to my Winter 2020 Eclipse Guide. So this winter we have a relatively short window compared to last eclipse where we had 3 eclipses, one after another, which gave us a month or so. This season we only have a 2-week window. And it starts on 30th November with the lunar eclipse of full moon in Gemini, 8 degrees, and ends on 14th of December with the solar eclipse in Sagittarius, 23 degrees. However, even though it's such a small window, and even when it's not, comparably to the whole year and its significance, it's always essentially a small window. But as I mentioned on many occasions before, the eclipses, and most of us will agree, I would imagine, eclipses are the most potent times in terms of energy activity and energetic upgrades and the potential to really make leaps in our evolution, soul evolution, personal growth evolution, however you call it. And the beauty of eclipses is we don't have to make a great deal of effort. We just have to be very mindful of what we are doing during those eclipses. So I'm just going to use this as an example because this eclipse is going to be, I think, and certainly feel very much so, a really pleasant one, a really lovely, light, leisurely one, just lovely. And maybe my last famous words, but I'm prepared to kind of put my stakes on this, and I'll see you on the other side, and we can compare notes. But yeah, that's what I think and feel certainly will be like. And so particularly this time we are in danger, and I do say danger deliberately, because it's so important not to do this thing that I'm about to address. So we're in danger of just like gliding and not really being very intentional and not doing the work. So what I mean by the work, or rather whatever it is that we are doing during in this case 2-week window, that we are amplifying. That's the essence in my many years long experience of eclipses. So if you want to doss about and just let Neptune as potentially the culprit of this, and other things like easy aspects, which I'll talk about later in more detail, if you just want to rest on those laurels and let them ride you and take you places, you will still get some places, but I think you will essentially amplify the attitude of going with the flow, which in itself, in fair measure, is a good thing, But I certainly wouldn't, personally, I wouldn't want my whole life to be just going with the flow. Yeah, maybe that's just me. So, but the point I'm making is that just be mindful, if nothing else, if you don't listen to this video after this point, just take this away. Whatever it is that you're during those 2 weeks this time around, you will amplify. That's it. That's all it is. So just be mindful of what it is that you're doing. So just as I said, that I had this image of like, well, if I'm just going to be dossing about having an easy, lazy life, yeah, I'm happy to amplify that. Yeah, I can go along with that, being Taurus, double Taurus myself. I wouldn't have a problem with that much, I don't think. But I think that would be naive to think like that, and that would be a danger again of thinking like that, because we have Neptune in play, and like I say, later on I'll go into the specific of that, because life will require us a different set of skills as we live it outside of eclipses, and if we have amplified our ability to just go with the flow and be lazy, I think it will not serve us in the long run, or certainly in those challenging times. So that's what I mean. Be careful what you're amplifying. So another example I like to use is, even though this one will be really, like I say, I think by comparison, just a breath of fresh air. Like we had in January, or even this last one in the summer, they were far more intense because there was Pluto and Saturn, Capricorn, and nodal axis is with Capricorn and Cancer, so far more intense and deep and personal. So I remember myself having not an easy time, having really a lot of shadow and darkness come up. So what I could have done is just kind of play the victim, or just blame, or just basically not do the work that these, whatever was rising up for inspection and for, you know, assessment and for work, basically. If I just ignored it or just wallowed in a victim mentality, I would have amplified that. But what I've done is, like, I've done, you know, I was just facing it and dealing with it and letting it do its magic on me, that kind of, you know, like inner shadow, soul work, however you want to call it. So I've amplified my skill in doing the shadow work. So even if I'm wrong, and this eclipse will be heavy hitting for you, because you may have Pluto in Sagittarius, and you may have it either at 8-degree Sagittarius, which is probably more likely if you're watching this, given the age that you have to be than 23. I don't know. Maybe you could be 23 as well. Meaning, if it's hitting hard on degrees wise, this eclipse, your Pluto in Sagittarius, then yeah, you might not feel so easy, and you might not be so light-hearted whatsoever. Hard Saturn as well could be, if it's in Sagittarius Saturn, or Gemini Saturn, and Mars or Moon potentially. No, I don't think Moon so much. So Pluto Saturn could be particularly difficult, and or 12th house. Sorry, I could go on forever. Or 8th house. So there are possibilities that this could be for someone in particular, someone's particular chart, not so easy. And the point is still to just rise to the occasion and be your bravest, bestest self in facing whatever it is that you need to face. And then if you listen to the rest of this video, you will hear some good points and some, good advice. I would hope so anyway. That's the intention of what's particularly helpful to be doing during these 2 weeks. So that's my point. So the ultimate point, the ultimate takeaway is, like, just be very mindful of what it is that you're doing during these 2 weeks, because that you'll get more of that. So another thing, important thing to remember about the eclipses in general, is that they're a perfect opportunity for us to use our personal set of skills and our personal chart and our personal, our own life and our own journey to contribute to the bigger picture. And so it's the ultimate form of contribution to the world, making a mark, doing your bit for the world, for the betterment, for the future, for leaving, contributing to a collective legacy that you can say you're part of this because you have contributed by doing your own work aligned with the collective need and work. So they're so important for that reason as well. So whatever you're doing, it will be adding, it always does, but particularly so during the eclipses. And why that is because eclipses are about the nodal axis that we as a collective, as the world, as earthlings experience at any given time. And because they're about sun and the moon aligning with sometimes closer, sometimes not so, depending, but aligning with the axis. And axis is the compass of where collectively we are headed, and in particular the North Node. So in other words, if we can actively and intentionally align ourselves with the North Node at any eclipse, any given eclipse, we are really not just doing great by ourselves, but doing great by the world we live in. We are co-creating the world that everyone lives in, right? And the North Node is the moral compass, if you like, the North Star in a compass. So it's like where we are headed and where we should be headed. And in this case, this is North Node in Gemini, and I will be talking about that. I'll tell you in a moment how I structured this presentation, if you like. But I just want to kind of explain this piece before I do that, because it's relevant. So, no, even if you, and maybe even particularly if you don't have anything significant at these degrees of Gemini or Sagittarius or even Pisces and Virgo, you're maybe even better placed to be doing the work of the eclipses or the work of the North Node, in this case Gemini, because it's like you have no other work to do, if you like. I mean, I'm being silly and simplifying something, but you hopefully get the kind of metaphor here I'm saying. But either way, if you're doing your work, you're also doing, the collective work. But the compass, the moral compass, or the North Node, the north point on the compass is the North Node in Gemini. And in a nutshell, and I'll talk about that kind of briefly towards the end of the presentation, essentially is now's the time to figure out for ourselves how to change the language around anything that is considered to be a shadow of Gemini. And then by what's that word? By extension, the time is to change the language of shadows, our own, any other worldly shadows, from a dispowering language to empowering language. So, because as I say at that point later in this video, all shadow is, it's fear, and it's fear two ways. So fear of the world around us, fear of us as individuals, me, you, whoever, and therefore judging us unfavorably, so it shuts us down because it fears something that we seem to exhibit and carry, either because they don't want to carry their own, as well as something that we have on our own anyway. So it's that fear, or the fear of us, that perpetuates this shadow, but it always gets triggered from the outside, from external sources, others in this case. And then our fear holds that shadow, makes it thicker and darker and humid more and damper and whatever. By our fear that we know that if we display it, we will be shot down. I mean, metaphorically speaking, or sadly maybe not. So if you approach any language around Gemini shadow, or just shadow full stop, that whatever is relevant, whatever kind is relevant to you, if you approach it from this place, that it's coming from fear, that's why it's shadow, then you have a good starting point to rephrase it, reframe it, revisit it, redefine it, and not from fear. So anything else, love ideally, but again, that's a murky waters. Love, that's, I think sometimes I feel that's a video on its own. It's not, I don't think it's love as we talk about it and throw it around the word so easily. But let's say that's why I prefer empowerment and disempowerment, because you will know how that feels. Love, yes, if you think you can handle and know what love is, like not love for another, but the love I'm talking about has to come from that place of just love, not for anyone, not for any destination, no hidden motives, or like I said, this is a video on its own, so I'm not going to go there. Hence, empowering and disempowering language. So if you feel the language is making you feel smaller, then you're off track. The moment you feel the language fills you up with love, or fills you up with this expansive, or makes you feel lighter and more expanded, then you're on track to change the language in the right direction. So doing this work, whether for yourself personally, like I say, because it's something's coming up for you, or more collectively or generally, this work around language and meaning allocation is you doing the work of this eclipse, i.e. Sagittarius, Gemini, meaning making, language, creating meaning, language as a signifier, what does it mean? And also this piece about Gemini's ultimate wisdom, the language is unreliable, unstable, and I will link that I will call it famous presentation of mine, that it is dearest to my heart, and I feel somewhat possibly groundbreaking. At least I haven't heard anyone speak of it since. That in the terms that, in the ways that I spoke of that period and that transit. That language is essentially, like I say, unreliable. It's all but poor translation, which is Franz Kafka's words. So Gemini knows that at its heart, at its core, even not so deeply, just Gemini knows that this is all a joke, but not in a horrible way, in a way that it's fantastic, that it's fun, that it's playful, that it offers freedom, immense freedom to therefore do what we want with it, but then be very mindful what it is that you are creating, because there is so much power, because it's essentially, such a kind of slippery tool, languages, right? But equally, like Mercury, it forms, it stays in its, it has a form, very clearly defined form. So this language does create form, i.e. our reality, or even our bodies, as in how we feel and how we speak to ourselves. We therefore treat our bodies in the way that reflects our internal monologue or dialogue. Depends how many of you are in there. In my case, always a dialogue. So because the eclipses are the times where we are working for the collective, if you like, I have divided this presentation into two chunks, well, a few chunks, but first I'm going to take a long view, then I'm going to zoom in on the actual, the eclipse itself, the 2 weeks, the aspects and transits going on. Not many, but, however. And I was going to do Saturn and Jupiter conjunction, but I think I'm going to have a separate video at some point, don't know when. But yeah, I have so much to say about it, and I just don't want it to be too much of a rant. So not now, but it will be in the near future. So the long view, the zooming in, the close-up to the actual eclipse, and then at the end I share what I will be doing, one of the things I will be doing during that time. It's like a practice. It's like practically how I'm going to be creating my own language, and how I'll be creating my own language of empowerment. It involves oracle cards and making cards, so that's at the very end. And I'll have timestamps below for those 3 sections. But before I launch you into if you're still with me, launch you into the presentation itself, I just want to say a couple of words about this long view. So because this particular 2 weeks we are going to be having is just going to be 2 weeks in the run up to Christmas. So, well, it's COVID, so it's not the usual kind of Christmas, presumably for many of us, of frantically, doing things, getting things ready, whatever your story is, your life is about around that time. But still, it's just 2 weeks in our lives, and then we're back to, outside of the eclipse, and then that Christmas and New Year, and the usual kind of life goes back on. However, it is, because it's such it's a piece of such a big picture, particularly as of this year, since the Pluto Saturn conjunction and its colossal meaning that it has on us, and the ripple effects that are going to take us all the way to 2044, and essentially all the way to 2044, I would say, actually. What I've done is I've taken this long view up until 2044, and it's not that long as it sounds at all. In fact, I just pick a couple of things, as you will see, something that I think is incredibly important and unique to the times we live in, to this cycle of the relationship of Pluto Saturn that just started its new cycle in January this year. So I'll be taking you through that as a way of reminding you. So when we are stuck in day in, day out, like these 2 weeks, maybe it's hard sometimes to be reminded, or to remember the big picture. Or rather, if we don't know the big picture, it's hard to keep us motivated day in, day out. Because this is just one of the many eclipses up until 2044 that we will be building on this work we are doing this time, and then the next time we'll be building this new paradigm, this new brave world of the Aquarian age, and all the the not so lovely stuff that comes with that. Don't forget, Pluto will be there soon enough and will show us all kinds of deep subterranean unconscious stuff that is buried within our Aquarian consciousness as it stands at the moment. So, so my point is, this is just one tiny step or small step in many steps that we are taking. So I'm going to give you the overview, so you, when you're a bit lost, you can remember why you're doing, why the language, why the Aquarian, why the other stuff that I talk about. I'm not going to give them away just quickly just now, but are important, because they may not actually have relevance, direct, obvious relevance to your transit at a time. So do your transit, do whatever it's happening for you, but do not forget the bigger picture, please. I mean, yeah, do what you want, but that would be it would be my plea, as I would love to inspire that kind of work for, you know, the brave new, building on the brave new world, and it starts with us. But the eclipses are times when we can actually amplify the collective by doing, you know, doing the work ourselves. We are adding and exponentially contributing to the world. So yeah, and just the last piece, nothing to do with the eclipse. Well, in a way it does, but so I'm usually unavailable, not unavailable literally. You can contact me via email should you need to for some reason, but I'm not taking new clients during this eclipse or just any eclipses. If you're already my client and if we're working, that, you know, that's fine, but the new clients, no, not during the eclipses. And usually I'm kind of quieter than usual on social media, but I don't know, I don't feel like, in fact, I think this one will be, I won't be, because it's Gemini. And so yeah, but after the eclipses, I have some plans for, yeah, some more changes to where I'm taking darker materials. But I'm waiting for the eclipse to, yeah, to kind of confirm or not, or just see what will happen and who I will be on the other side of this eclipse. I don't foresee major change, like I felt the other twos brought about, but never say never, particularly when it comes to eclipses. So okay, so hopefully you enjoy this and you find it helpful, and yeah, I'll see you on the other side. Happy eclipse, happy winter 2020 eclipse. So I'm going to start with a long view and talk about where we are headed quite a few years down the line, so that when it comes to this particular eclipse and many others later on, we know why we are doing what we are doing today, because in the near future it will pay off great dividends. Therefore, will keep us motivated, will keep us inspired, and on track. We are all birthing the age of Aquarius, whether we are astrologers or whether we are practitioners of any other esoteric science or none of the above. We are all in this process and in this labor of birthing the age of Aquarius. Some of us are kicking and screaming, some of us are much easier about it and much happier to be birthed into this new paradigm. But nonetheless, we are all in it. So the more intentional and the more aware of this process and of all the intrinsic difficulties and that we are encountering as we go through this birth, the better equipped to come out of the other end happier we are. Personally, my take on the sort of timeline for the age of Aquarius is that I feel and think that the most palpable experience of this shift in paradigm, of this paradigm shift, we have already experienced when Saturn moved into Aquarius in, I think it was May, I may be wrong, and certainly when it goes now back into Aquarius on 21st of December with when it's going to make this major conjunction with once in many lifetime conjunction with Jupiter. So I personally think that is going to be in history known as the time where we all felt it, like we couldn't mistake it for anything else anymore. Many astrologers I'm aware of are saying that we've been in this for a while now, and these ages last about 2.5 millennia, or something like that. And so I think it's silly to have an actual date, or it's unreasonable. But I would say that Saturn and Jupiter, particularly Jupiter, will be expanding and amplifying and, giving us the excess, or excessively making us excessively feel it, this shift. So I reckon for me, that's kind of the marker of the Aquarian age. Then we're going to have Pluto moving into Aquarius in 2023 briefly, and then tittering on the 0 degree of Aquarius on the same degree that this conjunction happens, and then it goes back into Capricorn again for the last few months of 2023. And then I think it's February, but don't quote me on that, I haven't got it in front of me, in 2024, when Pluto will move forever. Well, we'll move into Aquarius and to stay there till 2044. Now, you will remember this year 2044. Very soon I'll show you why it's important. So my prediction, if you like, how I think this will play out is between Saturn and Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius this 21st of December, until Saturn leaves Aquarius, and I haven't got a date in front of me, so it's about 2 years, just over 2 years, I think. We will be feeling like this major injection of the Aquarian archetype, of the Aquarian spirit, of the Aquarian energies, of Uranian Aquarian energies. I think it's going to be shocking. It's like the coronavirus was shocking and still is, in its sort of suddenness. I'm not making any predictions. I mean, it's not really the word I like to use, but I couldn't think of anything better. So I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if this whole virus story ends abruptly in a good way, that it just disappears. But that could be just, may not well happen. I don't know, but I'm just sort of suggesting potentially. But so for the next 2 years, up until 2023, while Saturn is still in Aquarius, we'll be really starkly aware of all stuff Aquarius and Uranus. And then, fittingly, as Saturn moves into Pisces, Pluto will move into Aquarius. It's almost like we'll settle more into the Aquarius or Aquarian age, but we'll be then asked to do some deep, deep work on cleansing and purifying and transforming all that has kind of been brought up to the surface and has been we have been made aware of so starkly, like I say, during Saturn and Aquarius. Now, when Pluto moves, after Saturn leaves for Pisces, when Pluto moves into Aquarius, we'll go deeper, we'll go subterranean when it comes to Aquarius, all thing Aquarius. So we'll have another video sometime soon on the actual Saturn and Jupiter conjunction, and just generally Aquarian archetype in that respect. But for the time being, here and now, I just wanted to give you a sense of the timeline that we are working with. And those years, 2023 and 2044, will become very apparent very soon why they're relevant. And 2044 is when Pluto goes into Pisces. So this birthing of the age of Aquarius is a procession of the ages. So before the age of Aquarius, we had the age of Pisces, or the Piscean age, and that was for the last 2.5 millennia. So in other words, we come from Pisces, we move from Pisces to Aquarius. So bear in mind as I describe this visual here, this picture. So what you're looking at on this screen is Stanislav Groff's Perinatal Matrices, and then Richard Tarnas overlaying it with archetypal astrology and how those perinatal matrices correspond to astrological archetypes. So we start with Neptune, to Saturn, to Pluto, to Uranus. And in terms of perinatal, meaning before we get born, so the stages of birth from conception to actually being born are represented in this archetypal visual here. So being in the womb, in the kind of blissed out state, is a Neptune archetype. Then the contractions start, and we're being squeezed out of that and cut out and separated from that blissed out state as a newborn, as a fetus or baby. I mean, so, and we're pushed out a canal, a very tight canal by comparison. So this is a Saturn phase where there's that sense of compression, depression, like limitation. All of a sudden, this baby becomes aware of its limits and a very different reality, pretty stark. And it's a kind of matter of life and death for the baby, literally sometimes is for the mother as well. And that's a kind of Pluto archetype. So this passage through the birthing canal till the actual birth is a Pluto and Saturn archetype. So the kind of the contractions as the baby starts to come out into the birthing canal is Saturn. And then as he moves through it, continues to move through it, is more Pluto, because it's, is he going to make it? It's like the facing of the darkest, birth, life and death kind of matter, if you like. And then a baby gets born, literally comes out of the mother's body, and that's a Uranian archetype. So the baby is free, as in liberated, as in independent, becomes immediately independent of her mother's body or his mother's body, and the baby can breed on her own. And although we don't ask the baby, since the baby can't talk, but there's a sense of relief and that freeing and, like I say, liberation. All of those are archetypally fits with Uranian and Uranus, or Aquarius, which is, for me, I'm using them interchangeably. And there's also trauma associated with birth, literally, because it's so sudden. And that gasping for the first breath that the baby's taking with their own lungs is, it's still in that kind of on the precipice of life and death. So that's the Stanislav Groff, and that's in my book, the book I keep recommending, Archetypal Universe by Renn Butler, is really well and easily described and explained. So if you have the book, then that's at the very beginning, you'll see what I mean. So that's the order of birth, archetypally, astrologically speaking. But if you look at it, this is why I'm including it here, and this is part of my older presentation that I'll the link to it I'll include in the description, which I highly recommend you watch, because it's very relevant to this winter eclipse, but also the Aquarian age. And so if you look at this, what I see, and this is, like I said, why I included it here, I see Neptune, which is Piscean age. I see Saturn-Pluto conjunction, and I see Aquarius, the Aquarian age in Uranus at this end here, right? And to me, this was one of those eureka moments. To me, I find such amazing, like shocking almost symbolism and meaning and correlation and correspondence to the birth of the Aquarian age with the birth of, real birth, archetypally speaking, but also that this has all been triggered for us with the Pluto Saturn conjunction we had in January this year. And although, this whole Aquarian age story is an ongoing thing, it's not like I could say, even though those dates I mentioned earlier are in fact very relevant, I would say, and are meaningful as I described, we have been in the process for a while. But the Pluto Saturn conjunction is what was the jolt, not necessarily conscious enough, but the jolt that we couldn't deny anymore, that something is afoot. And until Saturn moved into Aquarius after the January conjunction of Pluto Saturn, we were in the birthing canal of that darkness that we knew something was happening, but we just couldn't know what that was. And then we had Saturn Aquarius, which correlated with a wide, I think by then Corona was, throughout the whole world. It was already happening, and with the lockdowns and all that, but that sense of isolation and the separation from the way of the old order and the new order, the new world that we all lived in a sci-fi movie, all of a sudden became so clear. It came to form when Saturn moved into Aquarius, but between that point and Saturn and Pluto conjunction, we were jolted all the same, and nonetheless jolted into this new paradigm, but we're kind of still blind up until, like I say, Saturn in Aquarius. And the timeline I talked about earlier, 2023, 2024, and then 2044, is this birthing canal. Or maybe I should be more fair and realistic. So in my theory is that we are in the birthing canal up until 2024, up until Pluto moves into Aquarius for good, for quite a few years. So 2 questions I ask myself, and I'm putting them to you as well, is to use this time up until 2024, but also 2023, to prepare ourselves for this birth. So the first question is, how will you prepare yourself to be born as this new paradigm human being? And what or who will you be as this new paradigm human being? So I have one suggestions, a big one, and it's irrespective or in addition to the eclipse story, which I still haven't got into whatsoever, and that is Chiron. So one solid, fail-safe, bulletproof, watertight method of doing this, preparing and figuring out who you are as this, Uranian new paradigm human being, which is essentially fully individuated, or as fully as one can be, and emancipated human being. So to achieve that, to get to that point, the answer is Chiron. Now, why? Chiron is the bridge between, or rather, I'll start this way. So Chiron is a maverick, astrologically speaking, metaphorically, archetypally, but also literally, astronomically, in the sense that it has an erratic path. It moves erratically, like we, spend so many years, immense years in Pisces, in Aries, and then none or hardly any in Virgo and Libra, and anything else in between. So it's kind of erratic, and it's uneven, or whatever the other word might be. So, but more importantly, and more amazingly, more fittingly to this birthing of the Aquarian Age story, is that its path never crosses outside of Saturn into the Jupiter, Mars sort of solar system, end of the solar system, our solar system, nor does it go over Uranus towards Neptune and Pluto, etc. So it literally just bounces back and forth between Saturn and Uranus. And Barbara Hand-Claw, which is an astrologer, that book I recommended in my other video on Astrology Book Recommendations. She calls Chiron the consciousness bridge, I think. I think that's the wording. But consciousness is the piece that the consciousness that we have become accustomed with, that we have developed, always at that level of having developed it. When it's finalized, this development at a stage of consciousness evolution, it's Saturnian, because it's been solidified, therefore, because we have developed it, right? And it forms a reality around us and within us and on us, like our looks and our physique is a result of our consciousness. So who do we think we are? We therefore dress or undress or dye our hairs or change our gender or sex. So literally our reality, once we establish certain level of consciousness, becomes Saturnian because it gets solidified. But nothing is ever static. It's continual evolution. So once we arrive at that point, soon enough, we will need to move past it and get to another, dismantle all that and start afresh, or not start afresh necessarily, actually, but just kind of, go to the next stage. That next stage, that step, that bridge, consciousness bridge, is Chiron, and it's taking us to Uranus, and Uranus is that goal. But once we get there, it becomes Saturn again, if you follow my metaphor. But what gets us from Saturn to Uranus, to this next level, up leveling of our consciousness, i.e. Uranus, right, is Chiron. And astronomically speaking, like I just described, but metaphorically also absolutely fittingly, because Chiron is the ultimate wound, or rather all the wounds in us. So all the stuff that makes us feel so vulnerable, so rejected, so vulnerable. In fact, I'm just going to leave it to that's where the fear of rejection comes from, because how we cannot bear to reveal ourselves for all the vulnerability and then receive rejection. I mean, imagine that. Just as I'm saying it, I'm just being electrified with, what's called, other words, like discomfort or very uncomfortable feeling. So just a quick kind of an example maybe, or an example. In today's world of social media, and Brené Brown, I think her name is Brené, yeah. She certainly was one of the champions of vulnerability. But we are still, and it's only natural and human and fine. I'm not judging, but I'm saying we're still struggling. Essentially, it's still a major leap and a major step that we are able to be publicly vulnerable, and now it's almost like a given. We are all very vulnerable publicly, but we still haven't done Chiron work fully, as long as we crave and need connections that are supportive of this vulnerability. In other words, as long as we are doing everything to avoid facing rejection as a result of us being vulnerable, we haven't really done our Chiron work. So we haven't walked this bridge fully. We haven't reached the Uranian stage. We need to be able to be vulnerable and be exposing ourselves deliberately, intentionally, to the world and to the public or audiences that we know will reject us. So that's the next step. And I'm not seeing that anywhere really. We're all experiencing it on some level because it's inevitable. It's all very public. So whoever we are, in however vulnerable we are on our public platforms, we will get people rejecting us, but we will always nurture and want to have a group of people, and the bigger the better, of fans, and that we will feel we are not being rejected by, which is cheating in terms of Chiron work. And for as long as we do that, my take on it is that we will not be reaching that Uranian consciousness, the Aquarian consciousness. Because, so this piece of rejection that we need to get really good at, actually really be reveling in it, inviting it, seeking it, not seeking approval, but seeking rejection, actively seeking rejection, to flex those muscles. And separation is another piece there, because the whole movement from Saturn to Aquarius, or rather Saturn to Uranus in this story, via Chiron, is that we are separating from Saturn, which is safety, which is structures, which is society, which is public image, which is our credibility, our what we are respected by or for, rather. I was going to say legacy, but that's not. Status is more relevant here. Our status, all of that we need to leave. So that's on one side of the bridge, and to go into this shocking, potentially traumatic initially, and then liberating experience of sitting and living in the Aquarian, Uranian world. That will then, no worries, soon enough become Saturnian, but then we move again. But yeah, so the separation is essential, and the rejection. So the two need to be sought out actively if we are to do the Aquarian human well one day, soon enough. Too soon for some, possibly. So let me go back to the beginning, which is in our case of everyone living today, is really the Saturn-Pluto conjunction that we had in January. And that has just triggered all of this in a profound way that there is no more denying it. It's like there's no coming back. In that sense, triggered, in that sense, powerfully triggered. Or the final trigger, maybe even. So we had it in January. And essentially, so the way I approach this for the other presentation, like I said, that I will link below, is any conjunction is a new moon phase or a new phase in the relationship of those two archetypes. And so it's like a new cycle begins. There's a previous cycle and there's a cycle before, and there will be many after. So that's what I mean by cycles. But at each stage of that new conjunction, a new beginning, is that new cycle starts. And then there are three other key turning points that happen in that cycle. And identifying them help us navigate the cycle and work with it and engage with it intentionally and constructively, right? As opposed to let it just throw us left, right, and center. So I've done that for Saturn and Pluto, and I looked back to the history when they last were conjunct, any other conjunctions, and then specifically the conjunction in Capricorn, which was during the Henry VIII, it's the 16th century, I think, Henry VIII, in England at least, and to just compare, because what I discovered for this cycle that we just started, there's something happening that I was like, okay, is this happening any other time, or is this unique to this particular cycle? And I concluded and found out that it's unique to this cycle. And for that reason, I think this is a remarkably important signifier of the cycle, Saturn-Pluto cycle. And that is Venus retrograde in Gemini. So the way I look at the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in January is that Pluto, our soul, met with Saturn, the taskmaster, the one who gets the job done the best of all of the however many planets we have. And Pluto gave it the latest new soul mandate to Saturn to deliver collectively and individually in our charts, and collectively, like I say. And but in the new phase, we don't really know. It's a dark of the moon and dark of the phase, so we don't really have that clarity. We know something's stirring. You just know that something is seriously different and changing, but you can't put words to it necessarily, or even clarity of mind or vision even. And we need that first quarter phase, first quarter square before we are possibly clearer on that. And then we have full phase opposition, where it's like a full moon, so everything is illuminated, starkly even so. So that's when we are the clearest. And then that's when we kind of know what was all this about. And then we have that period between the full phase to the last quarter phase to integrate, and then the last quarter phase to the end until there is a new cycle begins. It's about letting go and just clearing the debris, just clearing all the old stuff and preparing for the new again. And at each of these points that I just talked about, Venus is retrograde in Gemini, and this is unprecedented and therefore extremely significant. So three things are significant. That it's retrograde, which means we are asked to resit the exam, which is good for us because the exam is humongous. So there's no chance we can pass it in one sitting. But also, I'm being a bit silly now. But also, what this means, we will have to revisit. So it'll be like layers, like the cycles of any relationship, of any procession. We can complete one cycle and then we start a new one, and it's not like we're going to be seeing completely new vistas and experiences. It will just be adding on what we already learned, and it will be revealing new layers that within those same themes we'll need to be working further. And then we have Venus. So out of 3, so we have retrograde that's asking us to do this, we'll be revisiting, and then Venus, and it's a particular Venus, and I'll tell you in a moment about that, and Gemini. So those 3 archetypes, or three things, 3 points, are the messengers and the messages of this cycle of Pluto Saturn that started with Pluto Saturn conjunction. And if you remember from here, it is what will deliver us to the Aquarian age. So let me first, so the Venus, so I said there are 3, so that I mentioned about retrograde, and then that's relatively easy and hopefully clear. Now, this Venus that retrogrades in Gemini every time is a Taurian Venus. And that is like another, I was just having goosebumps and when I was discovering all of this. So why is she Taurian Venus? Because every time she retrogrades, in those 4 points, 4 key, milestones, there are no planets in Libra. There's one exception at the end, and I'll get to that. There are no planets in Libra, therefore she only rules Taurian planets. And if there were no Taurian planets, then I don't know what would happen. Just thinking on my feet now, I'll let that pass. But these were the Taurian planets. I wasn't looking for moon because this is too big a picture to be thinking about the moon as it moves. So in 2020, we just had the retrograde Taurus. Uranus was in Taurus. In 2028, Saturn will be in Taurus, and that's a particularly important one because we're talking Pluto-Saturn conjunction, as in Pluto-Saturn relationship and cycle. In 2036, Mercury is in Taurus. That's particularly another one that's so important because Mercury rules Gemini, and Venus is retrograding in Gemini. And then in 2044, which is the last quarter square of Pluto-Saturn cycle, Neptune is in Taurus. So we have, again, Taurian planet, but we also have Mars in Libra. So she has dual rulership in the last phase of Pluto-Saturn relationship. And I love that it's Mars because it's a relational planet, and it's Mars in Libra. It's like the integration of the Libra-Aries axis. But before I kind of say maybe a couple more words on that one, I just want to say what this means to me is that we are essentially tasked with Taurian archetype when it comes to our relationships before, and we have like 3 solid iterations of this Taurian archetype. So it's 3 times she's going to be ruling, she's going to be Taurian Venus, pure and simple, just like Taurus, pure and simple. She will be 3 times in 3 key pivotal stages of this relationship of Saturn and Pluto. She'll be a Taurian Venus. And so we are tasked to learn to really, really get our Taurus when it comes to relationships, do it really right and well before we are able and we are healthy and good enough to do Libra type of relationships. And if you think about it, that's just pure common sense, astrologically speaking. Taurus comes before Libra. We need to develop a good sense of self-worth, self-relationship with ourselves, self-love, all the self stuff that Taurus is about, before we can, so that we can come to the Libra type of one-to-one relationships, full, like complete in and onto ourselves. So those one-to-ones with Libra are what they're meant to be, equal and to independence. being in a relationship. That's the vision of Libra relationships, not the codependency, which is a shadow expression. So Mars in Libra at the end of this journey is like, at last we know how to do Mars in Libra, Venus in Aries, or basically Aries and Libra axis of one and the other, me and the other, me and you, two people together in a connection. It's going to take us how many years, up until 2044, for us to do this well. So I advise you and suggest you spend a lot of time understanding Taurian archetype, and you will be helped, and I'll explain in a moment how, by the universe, as always, to actually, like, there will be the ground to study Taurus will be fertile. And essentially so Taurus is, just a quick note there, an add-on, is not about dismissing other people, as in like not having connections or relationships. Taurus is driven by desire, and that's a healthy Taurus. He desires something and he gets it, or experiences it, or gives it itself. But what Taurus must do is not stay and not identify or equate the object of desire with the source of the satisfaction the desire fulfillment provides. So that desire, and I spoke somewhere else on this topic, when we can even imagine something and we want it because we imagined it, all that we are feeling as we think about whatever it is that we desire, and that we are on our way to get it, we are feeling it as if we already got it, because the thing itself isn't the source of that feeling of satisfaction and pleasure. It's in ourselves. So, but Taurus needs to kind of learn that through going for whatever he desires, and then discovering that in itself, in that thing that he thought he had a source of pleasure, the source isn't there. And he always comes back to itself to realize that actually the source of that pleasure is in Taurus, in Taurus, right? But it doesn't mean that he should stop, going and getting things, maybe, until he probably realizes that maybe there isn't a point. And I would suggest that's the Buddha path. But that's a particularly long view of Taurus. So sorry, So this Taurian archetype, we will be particularly well supported by the universe to really work with and really get good at once the North Node, that's currently in Gemini, moves into Taurus, and that will be December next year, so 2021 until 2023, I'm pretty sure. So we have 2 solid years, which you always do usually, to work with a North Node. So we'll be moving towards the Taurian North Node anyway, and what I just shared with you, bear in mind, and it will become particularly relevant for then. And even at the end of next year, 2021, we'll have the eclipse is one of them, I think, is in Taurus, or Scorpio, obviously. But yeah, I haven't got my notes on that particular one. That's for another video. So yeah, but the point I'm making, we are heading that way anyway, to be mastering this archetype. And so I call this slide here the procession of the North Nodes, which is another kind of alignment, how the universe is like stacking things up for us to walk towards the Aquarius, the Uranian age, right? The new paradigm. So this year we had Cancer North Node at the time of the Pluto Saturn conjunction. Then we moved to North Node in Gemini, which we currently, in this eclipse, will be about Gemini North Node. Then Taurus, then Aries, then Pisces, and then Aquarius in 2026. And then we're going to start again, the whole circle or cycle again, but reverse. So after that, we have North Node in Capricorn, which will be a throwback to the 2020. So it's like between now and 2028, when we have North Node in Capricorn, it will be 2 things. We are having a first quarter square of Pluto Saturn cycle phase relationship, right? So this is the first test on the back of following the new conjunction that we had in January. It's the first test, and at the same time, North Node is in Capricorn. How beautiful is that? We are coming full circle. So we have had steps and made steps towards the Aquarius North Node. So we are working our way towards it, and we are going to have the wonderful the opportunity rather to have really for the first time a wonderful experience of the Aquarian age during the North Node in Aquarius is again my prediction, right? I can't think of a better word. Yeah, I'm sorry, that's not really the one I like, but you have to just take it for the time being. And then it will be like, okay, but now how are we doing regarding Cancer Capricorn axis? Don't forget, Pluto is still so sorry, by then it's in Aquarius, but we have quite a few, well, two more years now to be working with the Capricorn archetype. So this is another kind of side point, which I think I was going to do it in the close-up of the eclipse, but I brought it up now. It doesn't matter. That for as long as Pluto is in Capricorn, it's great to keep an eye on all matters Capricorn in terms of its shadowiness, because the South Node was there, and Pluto is certainly the shadowland, the darker, the undercurrents, the unconscious. And then by 2028, when North Node is in Capricorn, that's what we will want to by then have mastered Capricorn in its highest, in its most elevated, most evolved expression. Yeah. But from today up until 2026, when North Node moves in Aquarius, and then until he moves into up until 2028, I suppose I should really say, sorry. So is for us to be working and focusing on Aquarian, or the new paradigm of the emancipated and individuated us, Chiron stuff, the wound, the rejection, the vulnerability that seeks rejection as a way of strengthening its core. Yeah. And core is Capricorn, so this kind of like a spine that we hang on our wounds, that we don't hide them anymore, is strong to carry us and carry those wounds, and we don't rely and don't need anyone's approval even when we are vulnerable. Only when we do that, like I said, we know we're doing both Capricorn and Aquarius, right? Capricorn because we are using our own spine bones to hang our wounds on, right? And we are okay with rejection, and we are separated from the public, from our status, from status, literally kind of status in terms of likes, as in literally and metaphorically in terms of likes on our social media. If that, I think that's the word, correct enough word to use, status. We have actively sought out separation from that, from the likes, and are not at all dependent on them, and are very happy in that place. And I think, and based on my own small personal experiences, the moment, and I've achieved this in very small pockets of my life, and for some periods of time, not consistently necessarily either, is there is something that it's like the new vistas open, and new people enter your life that are far more aligned, and they're not necessarily approving of this vulnerability, but they're not rejecting it, or rather it's utterly irrelevant. That's the ultimate freedom, when the wounding is irrelevant. So we are not seeking this parent-child, I will be vulnerable, but I need my community to be vulnerable. I need to be selective who I let in. It's natural, it's necessary step, but just be mindful not to stay there for too long. And as soon as you feel you can seek out actively rejection, invite it, welcome it. Go to people who you know won't like you. Reveal yourself to them. because anything less than that, we're playing out this parent-child dynamic. We might have said goodbye to our parents, in the sense we don't need their approval anymore, but we are still seeking approval of the same kind of parenting. Or I feel, am I safe to reveal this to you? We say this to our audiences, our followers, our friends, if you're not on social media. So we are replacing the dynamic is the same. We're just replacing the players. So therefore we've done not a lot really. We have moved a little bit, but not enough. Not enough for the Aquarian. We need to be in a place where we have this wounding, and whether we are rejected or not is irrelevant, and no one even considers it as a concept in relationships. But our wounding is hanging off our bones, and it's more than visible, but it's not noticeable, and it's not a factor in who we are, as in how others choose to be with us. It is a factor in who we are, as in brave and strong to carry it like I just described, but it's not, we are not chosen because of that. We are chosen because everything else, that who we are, is built on that or is supported by that, but it's something else, the complex you, right? Not just the wounds, thankfully. So you see how over the next 8 years, we are working with, we are heading towards the Aquarian age, even though, like I say, Pluto will be in Aquarius already halfway through this time. So we are deep in Aquarian age, but we are still very much working on Capricorn and Cancer archetypes to be truly free. Remember this. Please actually print this out, put it as a poster somewhere. There is no, until we have gone past the Saturn and walk the Chiron walk, we cannot enter this Aquarian age. And Saturn is obviously Capricorn, as you know. Okay, so the close-up, or the closer look at the eclipse, the particular 2 weeks window between 30th of November 2020 to 14th of December 2020. So on 30th of November we have lunar eclipse of full moon in Gemini, 8 degrees, and on 14th of December we have a solar eclipse on new moon at 23 degrees Sagittarius. So as always, the sort of the basic rule with any kind of astrological events is that the degrees of your natal chart, so if you have anything on 8 degrees, Gemini, Sagittarius, Virgo, or Pisces, you're going to be particularly affected, or this will be a particularly significant time for you, potent time to do the work. And by the work, I mean inner work, soul work, shadow work. And or if you have any planet, any point in your chart, any asteroid, on 23 degrees Sagittarius, Gemini, Pisces, or Virgo, again, super significant. These 2 weeks are going to be, and particularly there for the solar eclipse. If you're working with asteroids, I would use one orb max, really, 2 at a push. And if it's other planets, if they're nodes or if they're Pluto, well, any other planet, the closer to this degree, the better. But it's if it's 10 degrees and you feel called to work with, I don't know, your Pluto is on 20, what would that make it? 13 degrees Sag. My take on it is no, I wouldn't. But I follow your gut, and if you feel called to do the Pluto in Sagittarius work on this solar eclipse, I think definitely, so yeah, just follow your own gut. And as I said in the introduction, this is a lovely eclipse, really lovely, easy. I mean, intense maybe energies, and but yeah, by comparison to the last 2 we had, I think this is going to be a doozy. And the way I approach eclipses, as I described at the beginning and in the introduction, is really the North Node that we want to be heading towards. So we want to be bringing light to any of the shadow of that North Node archetype. So I'll talk about in a moment about the Gemini shadow and how I turn that into light, if you like. So that's why I'm focusing on the North Node. But it's an axis as always. So it's like we can't work Gemini without Sagittarius or Sagittarius without Gemini, really. But I do, so both would have definitely the theme of language and meaning making function, both. It's just what one does with what, and whether Sagittarius makes philosophies out of it and beliefs, and Gemini will make either stories out of it, also, but also Sagittarius is a storyteller. Then Gemini will gather new information and always seek out new, like new information, new skills, something new to learn. But then again, this is what I mean. Like you can't talk, even when you think you're talking only about Gemini, you are essentially talking about Sagittarius in a way, and in a significant way, not just kind of saying that, paying lip service to this sort of narrative, or rather, the way we talk about archetypes in integration, but actually literally. So Sagittarius is equally always looking for the next thing, for the adventure, for something new, something, that is going to teach him, and then he will want to teach it. But equally, Geminis can be teachers and can be instructors, and so you see what I mean. We kind of back and forth. It's like talking about, so focusing on, what I'm essentially trying to say here is that just by focusing on the North Node in Gemini, it's not like you're not working as the South Node in Sagittarius. But I just find it's like when you're focusing on one area, it's just easier. It's easier, and it gets less confusing, and it gets less overwhelming, I think, as well. So, having said all that, therefore, Gemini North Node is your North Star during these 2 weeks, and for the duration of this nodal axis till the end of next year. So, with Gemini, and what I've certainly noticed in my relationships, but also just again on social media, people I follow, or not so much follow, but just come across texts and conversations and YouTube videos and whatever, content basically online. And it's just uncanny how everyone is talking about how language is powerful, how language can change reality. I mean, this has been around since forever, and the most recent big one was law of attraction that kind of capitalized on this, think positive, and on all that. And so it's nothing new, but it's like I have never seen it being spoken so much and so in all areas. Like Netflix, my spare time, that's one of my guilty pleasures, like binging on some good sci-fi stuff there, and or just not only sci-fi, but news. As recently we were watching a documentary which has nothing to do with esoteric worlds or astrology or anything, and equally I'm hearing how people are becoming acutely aware of how language is powerful, basically, and that is North Node in Gemini in action. Any North Node, when we are going through that period, is palpably visible and obvious to the world, in the world around us. And so just allow that to really do its job on you, right? And change your language around anything and everything that it doesn't really help you anymore. It doesn't do anything for you anymore. And in doing that, you will be changing your beliefs, which is Sagittarius. And in doing that, you will be releasing all belief, which is South Node in Sagittarius. So, and this is not just the language that you speak to others, or the language you speak to yourself, but it's also the language you consume. And I think this is particularly important with the current, and this is only going to get worse. By worse, I don't mean the politics will get worse, or something, in that sense worse. I mean just our awareness and our concern with the with a society. That would be one of the markers of the Aquarian age, that we feel like, we want to take part in the creating this fabric of the new society, new world, new paradigm. We want to be actively participating. Activism is another word that's thrown around when it comes to Aquarius, and I have spoken about that one. With there is a shadow in my view there, but there is good activism, and I'm not going to go into that now. But my point is, we are, so a form of activism, maybe I can just say that much, a form of, in my view, healthy activism is, for instance, to be selective and discerning about who and what you are listening to. So that's why is that activism, is because let's assume that freedom of speech is a value shared. I would say it is, but maybe some will disagree, by Aquarius archetype, right? It's the Aquarian spirit, freedom of speech. But for that not to become source of evil like it has been in the world, in the sense of, just hate speech, let's say, etc., we need to be practicing responsibility that comes with what we choose to look at and what we choose to watch and what we choose to listen to and what words and content we choose to consume. And it's a form of activism, because the moment you don't stoke fires, even if to a content that you consider hateful and just awful and you just don't want to be part in it, that's you being an activist. You are cutting energetically ties with that, and with that source of the hate speech, let's say, and in doing so you are diminishing its power. What happens, and what's been happening for the last however long, and it will be happening, I imagine, for quite some time, I think, hopefully less and less, but here's how you can be an activist. And so what's happening rather is that people are engaging, thinking they're fighting against the hate speech. So they're engaging with hate speech by telling them, the hate speakers, that that's wrong, and however that's done, because I don't take part in any of that, so I wouldn't even know necessarily. I did in the past, but learned my lessons. My point is, when we engage, we stoke the fires. We keep the conversation going. More importantly, and terribly in the sense of unhealth and bad energy, we are perpetuating the hate speech, because even though we are arguing against this hate speech, we are, let's face it, hating the sources of hate speech. And even though we might not be using exactly that language, I think energetically we are. So we are just exacerbating already an issue, inflaming it further, in the name of freedom, in the name of good, whatever, So my invitation to do activism, so that would be in my view, that's a shadow activism of Aquarius. Fighting, just going against what you don't believe. That's just, that's not helping anyone. It really isn't. It's actually adding to the problem. So the activism is to withdraw, or rather to just turn away. And the more of us ignore things that we would agree are horrible and are just horrible to this world, or for this world rather, the less power the thing will have, the thing that we agree all that it's wrong, or however many of us agree that it's bad and wrong, etc. See what I mean? So disengagement, DIS engagement, is a form of healthy activism. So be very discerning what you consume and where you focus your attention, even and particularly if you think you're doing the right thing because you're fighting, you are telling them what needs to change and all that, you are not doing good, as in you're just making things worse. Astrologically speaking, Mercury, the ruler of this node, North Node in Gemini, is having, is basically very supportive, or it makes supportive aspects throughout the 2-week period. So it first sextiles Saturn and Jupiter. While it's in Scorpio, it sextiles Saturn and Jupiter. And this to me is like a good omen for the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction Aquarius. Mercury is exalted in Aquarius, even though some I've seen and heard over the years that think that Mercury is exalted in Virgo. I think I've recently seen, and yeah. So anyway, even if that's according to some true, to me it's like Mercury in Aquarius is exalted. So Mercury supporting, even though it's from Scorpio in this instance, supporting Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn, having a sextile aspect to them, is still a nod a bit into the future. Fast forward, a week or 10 days or a couple of weeks, when Saturn and Jupiter will be together in Aquarius 0 degree, in the sign where Mercury is exalted. So I love the implication, the connotation of this, of the meaning of these archetypes that plays like this. So it, to me, it feels really supportive. And like I say, it's like a good send-off of Saturn and Jupiter in as they enter Aquarius, as they join in Aquarius 0 degree. And then on 5th of December, Mercury will be trining Chiron. So this is wonderful because, this whole story about Chiron, how to walk Chiron, in order to become the individuated individual, the Aquarian age. We now have the language around that, Mercury, and we feel Chiron is in Aries, so there's a wound around courage and vulnerability and to be brave, but also Aries is rejection and that kind of non-subtle, somewhat aggressive or violent energetically exchange with another. And so it's a perfect time to formulate those scenarios, if not even put yourself in those positions. And in fact, I would say to really prepare yourself for potentially some family confrontations, because on 24th of December, Mercury will be in Capricorn by then, and will be squaring the same Chiron. And this is this piece when I said earlier that Pluto is in Capricorn till 2023 and then 2024, really. Throughout 2023, more or less. And for the next couple of years. So for as long as Pluto is in Capricorn, we are still asked, and we need to be working on releasing, or rather transforming, the shadow of Capricorn. So Mercury in Capricorn, adult conversations, mature conversations, conversations that are contained, that are not emotional, that are of integrity, done in integrity, right? Is squaring Chiron in Aries. So, and also Capricorn this is happening 24th of December, so this is a Christmas Eve. So that's why I'm saying particularly families might be relevant. Capricorn is also families, tradition, history, but that's, in my view, a shadow of Capricorn. And that's more Cancer, if you ask me. So, but anyway, so this is going to happen on Christmas Eve, the exact square. And it's family time. And Chiron in Aries is about the wound of individualism, of independence, of just doing your thing and not caring and worrying about what anyone else is going to think and whether you're going to upset anyone. But the square will suggest a crisis. So you might be getting, people will be upsetting you, possibly family members. So if you pay attention on 5th of December, when Mercury is trining Chiron, and Mercury will be in Sagittarius, and we're in the eclipse season of Sagittarius and Mercury, Gemini axis, I would be spending a lot of time working out your beliefs that are holding you back from being this mature conversationalist, someone who can sit with your family and have and is able to contain yourself emotionally, so you don't, like I say, spill over. Have the conversation in an adult way. So what's holding you back to do that? What is holding you back to be able to do that now? So spend 5th of December around that time in the run up to it, so early days of September. Spend it journaling, or however you do it, and even have the conversations with your family, imaginary conversations, just to kind of practice how you would do that, how you would sit, what your voice would be like, and run various scenarios in your head, all the kind of permutations of that conversation, just to get fit, like a gym, like a conversational gym. So when the time on 24th of December comes, you can hold that square far better than if you didn't do this prep. And prep is happening in the eclipse season, so you're particularly blessed in the sense that, it's like you make one leap, one step, and you find yourself on the other side of the world, because that's what the amplifying energies of eclipses do to you or to us. And also, Mars and Chiron are very supportive of these, of the eclipse nodal axis, basically, throughout. So the 30th of November lunar eclipse is going to be sextiling Chiron. And then the solar eclipse, Sag solar eclipse on 14th of December, will be trining Mars. And then Chiron will be going direct on 16th of December. So this Chironic piece that I started, when I talked about the long view, is really big, but in a good way. That's what I meant, that it's a doozy. It's like, it's just, we can really do some great work with not a lot of pain and effort. And the flip side of that is that we just might get, despondent or just like lazy and can't be asked, because it's just, the trine and sextiles are more like that they tickle you as opposed to push you. So push yourself, just make yourself kind of make an effort to work with your Chiron, or just Chiron in terms of wounds and everything I spoke already about. Spend some time this eclipse season to do that, because the universe is very supportive of that kind of work. I just spent time talking and wasn't recording. Okay. So the only potentially problematic aspect during this eclipse season, during those 2 weeks, is Neptune. So it will station direct on 29th of November at 18 degrees Pisces. And if you work with wide orbs, you can maybe say it's squaring the axis. I don't. This time I wouldn't anyway. So I wouldn't say it's squaring, especially as you will be squaring the solar eclipse on 14th of December. So it's like, it's once it's enough. But yeah, I wouldn't use it this wide orb on this occasion. But the fact that it's stationing directly means that its energies are particularly amplified. So that's its power during this eclipse, or at the beginning of it. And then, like I say, on 14th of December, it will be squaring the axis. So what this means is that we may be lost in a dreamland more than in reality. Now, there's nothing wrong with the dreamland. In fact, that's where the reality comes from. So I would, in fact, encourage to visit the dreamland. And by dreamland, I mean fantasyland, whatever that is for you. So it's use the escapist tendencies that you may be feeling to bring something forth from there. So I don't know, let's say even if you're like, just let's say you're binge watching Netflix, that's kind of your escapist route, the first one you go to. Engage with whatever that series is, your thing, right? Engage with it more intentionally, in that, why do you love it? It must be something about that life that you would like for yourself. So almost use it as a training ground, how you would see how your life would be if you were able to create it like the creators of the series did for that world and those characters, right? And then, because this is North Node in Gemini, so language in particularly important, see if you can then write your own version of that story, or be inspired by those. So spend some time binge watching or just watching a Netflix series or whatever, but then spend some time working off it or off of it, right? Meaning, yeah, use it as a springboard for inspiration for the life that you want. So in that sense, bring it into reality more. Presumably there will be a gap between that series and what your life is actually able to realistically achieve in the next year, 2 or 3 or whatever, I presume, right? I know certainly for me it would be the case. So bring it down to Earth. So do both. Do Neptune, but then use Mercury and North Node in Gemini language to make it more real. And doing all that during the eclipses is essentially like doing the manifesting exercises, and then, on steroids, as I like to say, or just will be amplified, and you're far more likely to not just attract, you will attract that world or that life, because you are more likely to become that person faster on the back of the eclipse, because you've been doing this work during the eclipse, right? And be extra mindful of your tendencies for this escapism, particularly since we have those trines and sextiles from the ultimate, how can I call them, antagonists and troublemakers, i.e. Mars and Chiron, the more difficult planets, right? But also Mercury can be a bit of a trickster, right? But they're, like I say, all forming really, supportive aspects, easy aspects to this eclipse, and then, like I say, add Neptune to the mix. We just might want to feel really, we might feel really lazy, and that's, remember, if you're feeling like that, and like we already arrived where we want to be, if that's your reality, of course, but be mindful that this perception of reality with Neptune there, so starkly present or powerfully present in a challenging way, might not be the reality. So just keep checking in with yourself, and don't miss the opportunity. So if you feel too lazy, I would question it and wonder whether you just taken too much Neptune, you drank too much, on the Neptune elixir or honey or whatever, and it might feel kind of cool, but it's actually holding you back, or rather, it's stalling your journey, your work, your progress, right? And then the last piece on this topic of the close-up about the actual eclipse, and the work that I recommend, or suggest is particularly helpful to do during these 2 weeks, is how to, like I said earlier, so North Node, look into your North Node with the intention to turn its shadow into light, and this is all shorthand, and there are, I'm sure, better words to use to describe this, but it will have to do. So focusing on Gemini, I want to flesh out few of those words, or some of the language around what's considered to be a Gemini shadow, and I'll show you, and I'll just share with you how I turned that around. And by that I mean how I turned that bad, negative language or negative connotations associated with that language, with those terms, with those descriptions, turn them into positive. So Gemini is so the bad traits, the sort of bad rap that Gemini gets is that it's a talker, it's excessive talker, mind over heart, superficial, unreliable, immature, restless, non-committal, tangential. Those are just some, like I say, that you will often see in those popular articles, just like, many other, content online or wherever, like listed under bad things. But I want to invite you to consider this, that all of this is only bad because other people have problem with it. or rather, that's its first instance. That's the first step in this judgment. Essentially, it is a judgment. So, excessive talker. So I'm thinking, I'm having a couple of Geminis in my mind who just are just like phenomenal. Like in terms of they do talk. They can talk for England and for US and win all the Olympics or whatever. But I love listening to them. Um, and so that is a quality, that is a talent. I mean, I watched some of their videos, and within 10 minutes they have said so much, and they have just been fast in delivery, and it's just like words are tumbling over other words. And but it's all actually, to me, makes another. They have a huge following as well, and it's wonderful. And and it's like a stream of consciousness being, spoken out, as it were. And so it's not a problem in itself. It's a maybe problem when someone is, if that's how they will be talking in the company of someone else, and that someone else, wants to say something and they can't get a word in edgeway or whatever the expression is. um, and so, yeah. So then it's the problem for another person. So why is it not a problem for you if you are this person, this Gemini, this excessive talker, right? First, do you care that someone doesn't want to, you know, be with you or in a connection with you? You may not. And therefore, you know, doesn't matter to you. Then therefore it's not a problem for you. It's just a problem for them. Um, Mind over heart. So either to be, not, they're not emotional, Gemini. It's not, doesn't feel or doesn't have emotions or doesn't express emotions or whatever the kind of bad reputation may be. I mean, Gemini is meant to be it's a cerebral sign or archetype. It is about mind. And funnily, mind does influence the heart. In fact, it's the starting point of how heart will feel. So it's that piece about what words you choose to speak and what language you use. That is how you will feel. So, and that's the piece between Gemini and Cancer. We need Gemini to tell Cancer how to feel. I don't mean literally Gemini person tell Cancer person. I just mean the language and the mind is what defines how we feel. And so again, I've known, and because for some reason I had so many Geminis in my youth, friends and boyfriends, but certainly both really. So I kind of feel like I know quite a lot about Gemini, and my Mercury in Gemini as well. And I always found that people who had problem with this particular trait, mind over matter, not very emotional, um, not very romantic or whatever, were just one kind of people, or just certain types of people rather. And I've witnessed over and over, not, over and over, right? These very Geminis that split up from girlfriends, and they were broken, they didn't like it, they were not happy. But it was like, what do they want from me? These, in my case, those were men, and those women were non-Gemini. So it's like, what do they want from me? I don't know what they want. I don't know what it is they're asking of me. And then they over and over found, women that were usually Aquarius, were the typical. I mean, this is just, I'm simplifying something that's far profound, and there's far more profound. But nonetheless, and they were gotten. Aquarius is equally non-emotional in that way that those other girls wanted them. So you see what I mean? It's like we would, and this usually happens in youth, and we grew up with this, and not to mention parents, and then siblings, and then peers, and then school, and neighbors, and aunts, and uncles, and all that, before we have formed our own identity independent of them, which is never really independent until we actively sever those and decondition from those decades or years or whatever, usually decades, at least couple. So my point is, we were just not with the right people. They gave us this bad right, reputation. And there are people out there who actually love listening and love being entertained by their partner, and they would love excessive talking, funny kind of, Gemini. Superficial, unreliable, immature. This is this piece about the child and parent. So why do we want people to be reliable? Yes, if it's like a business relationship where there's money and other kind of contracts and sort of, yeah, I get that. But in personal or friendships in particular, why do we want reliability? What's wrong with immaturity? And, I just, it's my point over and over again here is that all of this is coming from certain groups and certain kinds of people that crossed your path or crossed other Gemini's path. And this goes for any sign, for any people, right? The principle is the same, and have had a problem with certain traits, and those traits don't fit into, like I say, a romantic relationship in the sort of traditional sense of Leo maybe and Aries and Libra and Leo. I was going to say Aquarius possibly, yes, yeah, maybe not, I don't know. um, and Scorpio Pisces, or so those are the kind of big grand narratives that we have grown up with, but they don't fit a Gemini particularly, let's say, characteristics. Doesn't make Gemini wrong. So find the people who will get you exactly how you are. If you feel like you want to be more open emotionally and be able to, express emotions in a different way than you are to, then don't worry about your Gemini-ness. Look to your moon. So it's like, distinguishing and discerning where those problems, if you feel them as problems, lie, and not stop being the gray Gemini that you are. Tangential, someone recently, I had to laugh hard because I'm tangential completely, but they said they read somewhere that it's a sign of like really intelligence or something, and I'm thinking, well, Gemini, yeah, it's next to Aquarius, like the sign of that kind of cerebral intelligence, just mercurial, right, energy or mind. Non-committal, unreliable, immature. Like I say, those are the words, the Capricorn kind of Cancer axis, and that's what our society rests on. Essentially, our society rests on Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer, and one day I might have a video on that Grand Cross. And so these judgments come from groups of people that really don't get Gemini. So Gemini is kind of, like I say, vilified, if you like, for things that are so natural to him or her and should never be eradicated, should be celebrated, because grown-ups don't need to feel like, grown-ups, proper grown-ups that are secure in themselves can have fun and feel and be mature. So what, the immaturity that actually is criticized here is the kind of Cancer-like. That's not really Gemini. The Gemini immaturity is that it just doesn't take, it's everything is fun and nothing, or rather nothing is taken too seriously, because they get the joke. They get the joke of life. And unreliability, again, it's Cancer, it's Capricorn, why it's shadow Capricorn, right? So what if it's why should anyone rely on me? Let's say me, Gemini, right? If I am one, why should you rely on me? Don't rely on me. I don't, be your own. Rely on yourself. I'll rely on me, and we'll see how we go. And that's a kind of more grown up and relaxed, or yeah, just grown up way of relating and being in any relationship, really. So that is the conclusion here, is that all the shadow that you will find, or most of it, or not even all the shadow, is judgmental. It's the social instruction, and just be careful which judgments you accept. Sometimes you will agree with those judgments, and only then do whatever you need to do to change that, to transform that into something that you prefer. But only if you are actually unhappy with that trait. But more often than not, I've seen over and over again that we just adopt this judgment, big judgment of the world, and then we just berate ourselves or beat ourselves up or feel guilty and bad, and it's all wrong, if you ask me. And I just want to say a couple of words about Gemini and Sagittarius. Over-promising, under-delivering. Yeah, over-promising, then under-delivering, arrogant talk, too many options, unable to choose from, self-righteous talk. So that's kind of, to me, this could be either Gemini and Sagittarius. That's what I mean. You know, they're on axis, so it's like it's the spectrum really. So a point here again is the freedom of speech piece about Aquarius, how to deal with Gemini Sagittarius, self-righteous talk, arrogant talk. So this is the piece about hate speech. Potentially that could be, you know, equally Gemini Sagittarius. We need to be exercising our own right to choose who to engage with, and our own ability and power to discern that this is not the conversation that I want to, you know, keep going. And I'm going to engage with only pieces that are helpful to me, and I'm going to leave the rest, not engage in a kind of combat or argument, you know. So self-righteous talk breeds more self-righteous talk. And I'll just quickly give an example. I remember someone, a guy a decade or two ago, I met in a bar with some friends, and he was he was just so arrogant, but he was just so full of himself. But I have Mars in such Sag, therefore I'm very comfortable. I don't feel threatened because I can be equally arrogant. I don't know. I just don't. I don't mind that at all, actually, as long as it's not physically aggressive. And he certainly obviously wasn't. But he was talking about something, and what he was talking was actually really interesting. But he was annoying me, so that was my personal take on him, and I found him arrogant. Maybe someone else wouldn't. But my point here is that I would never want to see him again, and I didn't. I mean, he wasn't my friend anyway. He was just in the group. But the point is that I chose what served me. I took what I needed, what I wanted, and left the rest. So I listened to him. I found some really interesting stuff, and he actually sparked some stuff I did afterwards. And yeah, so I'm really grateful to him. But yeah, he was obnoxious. He was just very, yeah, like I say, arrogant, just so arrogant, just in a way that was so annoying. And yet it didn't still interfere with my ability to listen. But once I heard what I needed to hear, I was wrapping up that conversation. It wasn't because I wasn't enjoying anything else outside of outside of what he was broadcasting. So that's another piece, how to turn the negative into positive and not to exacerbate it. And finally, I just want to share with you a practice that I will be working with and engaging with during the winter eclipses. So during this 2-week window that we have between 30th of November and 14th of December. And it's all about language. It's about creating my own language and empowering it to support me, and for me to rely on it as opposed to external language. So this Venus, remember the Taurian Venus of what I've shared up to now, that is a messenger of the Pluto Saturn conjunction we had, that language needs to be my own, and to be my own language and to be supporting me. So, I mean, I'll share in a moment my example of what I'm doing, but anything that will actually support that during the eclipse. So you could be creating your own dictionary, your own vocabulary. If what I'm, mine will be to do with oracle cards and stuff. So if that's not your thing, you can create your own dictionary, or spend time journaling, like manifesting journaling. So using like a notebook basically, and writing every day, spending half an hour writing your ideal life, whatever your dream life is, and really feeling those words. That's the thing. It's like those words need to induce a feeling. If they don't induce a feeling, they're empty. So as you're writing, unless you are feeling energized and beautified or whatever, just uplifted and inspired by the words you're choosing to put on the page as you describe your ideal and dream life, unless that's happening, then choose different words. Then you're then choosing empty words, not, you know what I mean? They need to trigger emotions, because it's only those emotions, energy in motion, that will attract, and it will be amplified by the eclipses, and also will therefore attract that into your life. So make sure that if you're sticking with just journaling and manifesting journaling, and or even, like I say, writing your own vocabulary diary, dictionary, make sure those words evoke feelings that are powerfully empowering. In my case, I chose, and I might be doing that as well. In fact, I will be, but this is kind of a mini project I've got going, and I mean I'll be doing this I'm doing this in the run up to the eclipse, so I'll be set for the eclipse period, like for those 2 weeks. But I don't think I've never done this before, so I don't really know whether it matters. Yeah, whatever works for you. If you just now heard this and you're kind of keen to do everything I'm sharing here to do it during the eclipses, I feel it's as good as. But I just have done it in the run up to. So basically, I have 2 decks, this one and another one. I'll show you in a moment. And I'm modifying them. I'm adjusting them to my own needs. And I picked them carefully. So I didn't want tarot, because I tried tarot, an old tarot of mine that I had that I never really gelled well with. So I thought I'll use it for this, and it just didn't work, because it's so imbued with stories. And this is tarot is, it's major arcana. It's like the fool's journey, the ultimate hero's journey, and then the minor arcana full of characters, and it's again storyline. There is a journey. There is, the aces to the kings, and all that. And so there is a procession. There is like a sequence of events. It's too loaded with meaning already for me to be modifying for something that is irrelevant of a particular sequential journey. So that's not what I'm doing. I want to have my own oracle, if you like, cards. In fact, more specifically, I have divided this particular deck, which I chose because I love the backs. And so I wanted to modify the least possible, not because I'm lazy or I don't think one should modify decks. I think definitely one should. But I just want them to be as easily shuffleable, and yeah, just because they're already made professionally. So I don't want to mess that up. The way they sit in my hand, the way they shuffle. So the less I have to add layers to them of correction, the better, basically. So I love the backs, and I wasn't going to do anything to the backs, and well, sort of. So that's firstly why I chose them, and I wanted to be a deck. And I love the title, The Universe Has Your Back, and that's exactly the point of this deck for me, is that I want to feel that someone has my back. Well, universe. But the messages, however lovely, they're all lovely messages. Like, I don't know, maybe 5 out of, there are 51, 2 or 3 cards in total here. So maybe 5 resonate with me, and the kind of got me excited when I read them. The rest just leaving me indifferent. They're just not my thing, basically. So I'll be modifying them, or basically just all it means just I'll show you. I'll be just covering those words to then write my own words on top of them. But what I'm doing with this deck, I divided in 2 sections. So here I have 30 cards, and here I have 21. 3 is my soul number in numerology, so that was important. That's why it's 3 and 3. 2 and 1 are 3, and this is 3303, right? So 21 cards here with the black moon. Originally it's a yellow, and I made it black so that I can quickly see the difference, because they're going to both live in this deck, in this box. So the 21 cards here are my yes and no oracle, if you like. Simply that. For so long I've been looking for an oracle for just a deck that would be a yes and no decision-making deck, and I never found anything that I resonated with, that just kind of made sense to me, that I liked. And then I looked at how to use tarot cards for that, and I get it, and I try that, but no, like I said earlier, the tarot is just far too infused with already so much meaning, that just simple yes and no just feels wrong. So I gave that up. I gave that idea up. And so I wanted, so I thought, I need to create my own, because for me, the yes and no, even though I'm a generator sacral being, it means that I do listen to my sacral. And it's still, I have to remind myself often, well, sometimes, but other times I'm just like, I just want want that sense of like some simple, straightforward yes, no, and then I again follow my own response to that. Now 7 times 3 is 21, so I have 3 sets of 7 cards here in this deck, and so 7 yeses, 7 nos, and 7 you already know the answer. So it's gonna refer me back to me, and and this is the piece about Venus, Turian Venus, that is the messenger of the Pluto Saturn conjunction that we are tasked with up until 2044. So it's this kind of language that's self-referential, rather, like what do I think, or rather, I already know the answer, and I will be looking forward to those probably the most. But yeah, so that's 7 yeses, 7 no's, and 7 I already know the answer. So that's in this deck, and then I left this one as it is because I love it too. And so these are, I'll show you in a moment, and I'll be basically putting, that's like an affirmation deck, sorry. So I will be writing, I'll write my own affirmations on these cards, the kind of affirmations that as I read them, I will hear exactly what I need to hear because I know what that is. And so this is what they look like, the other side, some of them obviously. So these with black are my no cards, where I corrected with black. In fact, sorry, so yeah, so black is no cards, white is yes, and I haven't got any here as an example that are kind of gold color is, I know the answer already. And so there was text everywhere you see these squiggles. That's where the original text was. And this is, by the way, the deck by Gabrielle Bernstein, which I'm sure everyone is aware of. I think it's very popular. So I, oops, sorry. So yeah, so I crossed them basically. I can't see them, and so they don't distract me, the messages, because they don't resonate. But I will have a clear no somewhere on here and on here, or a clear yes on these whites. This is a no, even though there's like a white there. And these two, this one and this one, are an example what it looks like before I kind of corrected. So they're going to be, some are going to be harder. This is going to be an easy one because it's straight away just white across these letters, and then here as well. Here somewhat less because I'm already in the different colors. There will be, yeah, but still, I don't mind at all. And those are the ones I'll be putting my own affirmations. And then this deck, but let me actually first show you the back, why I, so I'll be covering the backs with this. I got like a roll of self-adhesive black matte. It's lovely, actually. It has such a lovely feel to it, almost like leather. It's quite cheap, and I'll put the links in the description below. They're Amazon UK, so, but you'll still be able to figure out if you're not in UK what's your version of it. So that will be on the back. So I'll cover the backs. The backs have, each card has its meaning: strength, serenity, capacity, health. What else have I got here? Humility, change, travel, energy, and lovely sentiments. I haven't read because I don't want to at all get into the vibe of the author's words. I want this to be completely my cards. So I'll cover that, like I say, and I'll be left with this. Now look at that. I mean, this is just obviously, there are many more. They're quite a thick deck. I just adore looking at it. I adore shuffling it. It's like, sorry, it's, see how it's rounded edges and there are no edging or whatever that thing is called. So just like the photo goes from edge to edge, completely. And I want to look at this and have my own interpretation. I don't care what's on the back. I mean, obviously, great work for the author who's done this, but I just love the perfection of these images, the perfection of the execution of the paper and the card itself. But I want this to have my own meaning. And so these are going to be like my intuition cards. Like, I just want to check in with myself without words. I mean, I'll obviously have words once I checked in with myself. But so basically this would be, I would use this deck whenever something's going on, some rumblings, some shift, something's happening and I can't pinpoint what it is, and it's a bit, I'm unsure what's going on, and I just want to shuffle this and see what I pull and see what that possibly reveals, and just pure intuition and pure kind of my unique interpretation of these images, without anyone imposing their meaning onto this. I just cannot wait to do this. So basically, so I'm doing all this. I'm nearly done. So after today, I'll dedicate a couple of days to completely finish this that I just described to you. and then I plan to put them on, so I won't be using them until the first the first eclipse we have on 30th of November, and it's a full moon in Gemini, so, and it's North Node is in Gemini, as I said many times. So I'll be leaving them on my windowsill, and basically setting the intention for the eclipse to infuse them with the Gemini wisdom, with the most emancipated version and expression of Gemini. So the words and the meaning, and that's particularly the messenger, the magician of the tarot, right? But the messenger, essentially, the psychopomp between the worlds and all the rest. So I'll have my own kind of ritual around it, but it will be essentially to infuse them, and that's it. And I'll be then working with them through the eclipse season, to kind of, for them to get a real feel for me and me for them, and kind of like steep learning curve for the cards because of the intent. But the energies, as I spoke already, are pretty supportive and gentle overall, really, during this eclipse. So I feel this is a wonderful time. Sometimes, the eclipses can be too volatile, like we had them last two particularly, to try to, it's almost like best to kind of let the eclipse do its work on you, as opposed to trying to do much to it or for it or with it. But this time, definitely, I suggest you can definitely work with it. They're far more malleable and gentler. Intense still, but well-meaning and supportive. I mean, they always are, but they will feel like well-meaning as well. And yeah, so I'll be like using them, and then I'm not sure what I'll do on the Sagittarius new moon. Yeah, I'll probably just do the kind of cleansing or whatever energies may have just got stuck on there or something. Not sure yet. But yeah, but essentially the exercise is to create my own language that is going to be empowering, uniquely meaningful to me. And here I'm using images, purely like trusting my intuition, and actually an exercise in trust as well. And the other one, The Universe Has Your Back by Gabrielle Bernstein, that I have modified, as I described, to be super supportive of me in the way only I know I need to be supported. And that's it. So yeah, hopefully this was helpful, and I wish you magical and life-changing, but always, of course, for the better, eclipse season. And I will see you on the other side. I will not be probably very active during the eclipse during those 2 weeks, and then yeah, we'll see. I'll have probably some news and some kind of, again, new direction going forward, but all in its own time, good time, I'll be revealing and sharing. And but yeah, most importantly, have a fantastic time. This is such a wonderful eclipse, truly is. And just let the universe support you, but work with it, and just language around wounds and courage in particular, to be courageous and to be independent thinker for yourself, trusting your own intuition. I think it's one of the messages, and one of the lessons that we are asked to learn this eclipse season. Okay, so see you soon. See you in a couple of weeks, or maybe longer.